Hello, hello, Mr. P here, and on this episode of Cup of Tea with Mr. P, I'm going to sort of give a bit of a reaction to Fluff's recent My Issue with Gibson video and discuss my all-time favorite guitar, the Gibson RD. This is my 1978 Gibson RD Artist. This is my 2018 40th anniversary Gibson Mod Collection edition of the Gibson RD Artist. This is my very first Gibson RD, the 2007 Guitar of the Week Gibson RD Standard in Silver Burst. On today's episode of Cup of Tea with Mr. P, we're going to be discussing, well, Fluff's issue with Gibson and my all-time favorite guitar, the Gibson RD. What's going on, and welcome to episode 5 of Cup of Tea with Mr. P. Before we get into this, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of these gear reviews or my tone matching series. So I decided to make this video because I saw Agafish's response to Fluff's My Issue with Gibson video. Okay, so why did I call this Fluff's issue with Gibson? Well, because it's really his issue, not Gibson's, isn't it? For those who are watching this video and have absolutely no clue what I'm talking about, YouTuber Ryan Fluff Bruce posted a video with a super clickbaity title, which was really just him ranting about being mad about something very specific in regard to a certain model that he personally likes, which I obviously do as well. Yeah. This video is not meant to be mean, just sort of half poking fun and giving some of my own thoughts and info. I've been a fan of Fluff for years, and his video really kind of disappointed me, to be honest. A short backstory for you. The Gibson RD guitar, which originally ran from 1977 to 1982, had a 25.5-inch scale length until 1979, which is when they switched to the standard 24 3/4-inch standard Gibson scale. Being that Norlin owned Gibson, as well as Moog Electronics at the time, they decided to incorporate some of their innovations into many models of that era. There were 3 versions of the guitar. The standard, which was the only model to feature all passive electronics, followed by the custom, which incorporated Moog active circuitry by way of a bright or trick switch toggle. And then there was the artist model, which really went all out with a bright switch handling treble and bass boost, compression, expansion, block inlays, and the what's referred to as flying F-hole on the headstock. Now at the time, these models were not very popular for, well, a few pretty good reasons. One, at the time, they were actually the most expensive guitar that Gibson was producing. 2, people really weren't very receptive to all the active electronics introduced, not just into the RD, but other models that they were being put into as well. 3, because the bodies were maple, they weighed a ton. 4, and finally, people thought the guitars were ugly. I don't, but that's just me and pretty much a very small faction of people in the world. If you've seen my Silverburst video, a bunch of this info might sound familiar. In 2007, Gibson finally reissued the RD for the first time as a standard model in Silverburst, limited to 400 pieces in December of 2007 as part of the Guitar of the Week series that they ran that year. This is when I finally got my hands on my first RD. Yes, the one in that video. And if you scroll back far enough in my channel, you'll see that I used it way back for cover videos too. They would continue sparsely reissuing the RD standard model, first as an exclusive run to Japan in black and natural before bringing it stateside. In 2014, Gibson commemorated their 120th anniversary by issuing the RD Artist in white. In 2018, they released an RD Artist version yet again, this time in vintage sunburst as the 40th anniversary of the model. Now, on to the differences between the original run and the reissues over the past 16 years. The reissues had mahogany bodies as opposed to the maple of the originals, which some might agree is a great thing since this means that they weren't hernia-inducing. Next up, they kept the standard 24 3/4-inch Gibson scale over the 25.5-inch that the RDs originally started with. They also moved the jack from the top of the body to the side, which I personally thought was an awesome idea since it meant that your cable isn't going to loosen your output jack. The pickups in the 2007 reissue were dirty fingers, which many say were chosen due to how similar they sounded to pickups Gibson was dropping in guitars back then, which were the Series 4 and 6 pickups. The 2009 through 2011 standard models, however, featured Gibson burstbucker pickups. I think it goes without saying that the Moog electronics haven't been present in any of the reissue models at all. Oddly enough though, the 2014 and 2018 models did have active electronics via Gibson gem pickups. Some people don't like these. I actually really love them. They're like a higher output PAF. As far as bridges, they stuck with the standard 2-pneumatic bridge and stop bar tailpiece on all reissue models, with the exception of the 2014 model, which actually had a TP6 bridge, just like the original Artist models did. Now, I take issue with Fluff's video for a few reasons. Not just its clickbaity title, but the fact that he seemed to take issue with some kind of odd things. First off, the finishes. As mentioned earlier, the first time they reissued the guitar in 2007, it was in Silverburst, a color that the RD was never originally released in. Cool color, who cares? I'm just glad it wasn't released in Natural, which kind of looks a bit Karina-ish and ugly to me. Also, that Silverburst and white were the only times that Gibson strayed from the original finishes. Next up, the output jack was moved from the top to the side. Why would you complain about that? That just means more stability and not having to constantly deal with the jack loosening. I think that would be considered a win in most people's books. Weird pickups are mentioned. Okay, so the 2007 Guitar of the Week had Dirty Fingers pickups. I'll admit, I hated them, and I swapped them out for 57 Classics. However, as mentioned earlier, Gibson chose those pickups because they were the closest that they had at the time of release to what the company used to those original Series 4 and 6 pickups in the 70s. They didn't come up with the Super 74 until they released a Randy Rhoads Les Paul in 2010. After that, they threw in burst buckers, followed by the Gem pickups, which, again, kind of seems like a nod to the active electronics used in the original run. Considering that the odds of Gibson actually having the original specs for the circuit boards used for the compression and expansion system, or really anything odd from the Norland era, are pretty slim, I'd understand not doing a similar system. However, the mini switches seen on the final year's models could absolutely be done instead of doing like a push-pull type of thing. This would also give a bit of a nod to that last year's run without having to go the way of having to gut out a bunch of wood to put in some sort of active electronics. Now, could Gibson make a made-to-measure RD for you in your 25.5-inch scale? Yeah, absolutely. 25 grand though? Really? Come on. But I have to be honest, I have never seen anyone, with the exception of Fluff actually, complain about the scale length until I asked around, and that wasn't even really a fair question, to be honest. Being in a few different RD groups, I decided to start a poll on whether or not the 24 3/4-inch scale deterred people from buying the reissue RDs. The vote ended up being even. However, as always, when you have a poll where you can allow people to comment, most comments had to do with people kind of going off topic and mentioning either vintage all day over reissue or wanting a true VOS. And it looked like most were pretty okay with a 24 3/4-inch scale. There was one interesting comment though I feel like I have to point out. So, one commenter mentioned that they tuned down to A and felt that the 25.5-inch scale better suited the low tuning. Now, I want to make this clear for people. If you have a guitar that you're going to dedicate to one tuning, especially a low tuning, have it set up for that tuning in at least a 10-gauge string, and you're going to be fine. I've had plenty of Les Pauls, Paul Reed Smiths, and even hollow bodies and tunings as low as standard G for over 20 years, and I never had tuning issues because the guitar was always dedicated and set up for that particular tuning. Now, what really gets me is that this rant came from someone who essentially gutted their RD. I mean, you have DiMarzio pickups in your guitar, you took out Moog Electronics for what you call a standard Les Paul setup, so essentially what you really liked about the guitar is its cool body shape, scale length, and comfortable neck. Because if it was all about the sound of the instrument, you would have kept those pickups and electronics in the guitar. Just saying. As for thinking that the models would be popular, even as standard models, if released in all maple, 25.5-inch scale with a standard 2-pneumatic bridge and stop bar tailpiece, I highly doubt that, and I'll tell you why. Each time the Gibson has released the reissues, they didn't sell well. It wasn't because they weren't the same scale length or maple, they just weren't very well liked. There's a very small faction of people who like them, and because of this, pretty much all retailers from Guitar Center, Sam Ash, Musician's Friend, Zounds, American Musical, they all ended up blowing out the guitars at super discounted prices, like between $600 to $800. That's a big drop from the $1,200 and $1,700, which is what the 2007, 2009 through 2010 and 2018 models originally sold for. Now, if you're a company that sells gear, you know that it doesn't matter how cool looking the guitar is. If it weighs a ton like a maple RD does, no one's going to want to buy it. Think about it. Look how much crap Gibson got for so many years about Les Pauls weighing so much. So what did they do? They Swiss cheesed them, or the proper term, they weight relieved them, to appease the general masses, and then they chambered them. What's funny is that it's a possibility we might have gotten an RD Artist reissue in 2010, but not in the way that we might think. Zakk Wylde became a little enamored with the model after purchasing a '77 RD Artist from a store in Atlanta. He took off the pickguard, removed the electronics, and put in his signature EMG pickups because they sound slammin'. And then in October 2009, after the announcement of his BFG model, he tweeted that he was meeting with Gibson to release a signature RD Artist model. Obviously that never happened, but he did have some prototypes. We can't tell from the photos what scale they would have been, but of course one would have had his bullseye design, as well as the chainsaw and vertigo. The jack seems to vary from the original top mount, as well as the side input, and even the placement of the three-way toggle switch moved to the top mount like the Epiphone Lee Malia version. I wouldn't mind playing that yellow and black thin bullseye, that's for sure. Oddly enough, due to the serial numbers and low numbers that were released of the 2014 model, I wouldn't be surprised if those were actually leftovers of that limited USA run of Zakk Wylde RDs. So, Agafish made his own response video. Not so much focused on the RD, but definitely pointed out how Fluff was kind of in the wrong here. I have to say I like many aspects of his video, too. I can see why Gibson and Epiphone send him stuff to review. Dude seems to really know his stuff. A few things that were off from both of them, though. First off, in regard to not being able to custom order an RD from Gibson, it's actually depending on the day what kind of answer you're going to get, and it will most likely cost you between $5,000 to $7,000, which, considering it would be coming from Gibson Custom Shop, that's kind of not that bad, to be honest. Very far off from Fluff thinking it would cost $25,000. And no, it does not appear in your average dealer sheet, but dealers, depending on how big they are, actually can order it. The same actually goes with a true-to-spec 70s-era pancake body style Les Paul that Agafish mentioned. In fact, they actually do them in the custom shop now. I would show a bunch of pictures a good friend of mine who actually works there has sent me, but I don't want to risk getting him in trouble by making it apparent who sent them to me or the other info he's told me since working there. He's, however, known me for a very long time and always throws me info on RDs whenever he can, so that's pretty cool. For the record, I have to be honest, the scale length of the RD has never been something that I've ever really noticed. I sing and play guitar in my band, and I tend to keep one foot on my wah pedal while singing to balance myself at the mic. So, what do you guys think? Do we really need a VOS on a guitar that has obviously never truly sold well just to appease a very small faction of guitar nerds? Or is it just cool that Gibson has recognized the RD model in general by giving it a few cool reissues over the years? Leave your thoughts below, because I'd love to hear what you guys think. While you're at it, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button below to keep up with my tone matching series, gear reviews, my rant series that you're watching right now, Cup of Tea with Mr. P, as well as my in-depth series of RD videos that this episode has prompted me to start scripting out. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Mr. P, and I'll be seeing you soon.